You think your partner is secretly controlling or insecure. Let's examine both concepts to discover the truth. So let's really attack this. This is going to be a really fun episode because the concept of insecurity or controlling has especially become a major buzzword as we are dealing with the initial feminist movement, and now we're dealing with men coming into the real reality of what the truth is. So where I think it would be healthy for us to start is to really understand and define what is the concept of controlling. What is the concept of insecurity? Because the definition is actually really enlightening about whether or not your partner, male or female, is behaving in a controlling or insecure way. So when you look up the word controlling, it means to influence one's choices with force, intimidation, or threats. Let me say that again. A person who is controlling is only described as someone who uses force, threats, or intimidation. The word insecure means someone who is not firmly fixed, meaning they wishy-washy. Someone who isn't firmly fixed in a thing. Another way to describe that would be the word passive-aggressive. See, when you look at this, I think before you deal with it from a personal standpoint, we really would be wise to look at it from a professional standpoint. So let's look at this really fine line, because what we're going to discover is that there is oftentimes major gaslighting, specifically within the context of a relationship, where more often than not, as you're about to discover, it is a person who is out of control, who will tend to try to call people controlling. And it's actually someone who is used to dealing with someone who is insecure, who doesn't quite recognize that only a secure person is firmly rooted to be able to communicate things very directly, which is actually called healthy. So before we get there and unpack this, let's tackle it from a professional standpoint because it'll give us extreme clarity with the personal. So stay with me. An employer. An employer. If you focus on great businesses, let's just say Fortune 500, we're going to see something very interesting that I think best appropriates the concept of the thin line as it relates to, is something in control or is it out of control? Is something secure or is it insecure? So let's take your job, especially if you Fortune 500, Fortune 1000. If you work for any business worth the grain of its salt, it's actually a telltale sign about how we should personally manage relationships and affairs. Let me give you an example. So an employer puts out a job wanted ad, or they hire a recruiter. Is that controlling? Is that insecure because they need to fill the position? Or is that in control and they're being secure because they are addressing their needs? Let's take it a step further. Okay. You have to fill out a job application, or you have to submit a resume and a cover letter. Is that controlling, or is that insecure? I think not. Okay, let's take it a step further. All right, to get the job, you got to pass a drug test. Is that controlling? Is that insecure? Okay. Once you get the job, you got to go to a new hire orientation where they require you, if you want the job, to be here on this certain day at this time. Is that controlling or is that insecure? I think not. Once you're on the job, they make you sign what? An employee handbook, and they make you sign an acknowledgement, receipt of acknowledgement that you know that in order to keep this job, here are the things you're going to have to do. And if you do enough of these bad things, you're going to have to find another job. Is that controlling? Is that insecure? I think not. Okay, so let's say you start breaking the rules, meaning you start falling out of their boundaries or standards, right? There's going to be what? A correction behavior, meaning that Here's what you're doing wrong. Here's what you need to do. If you don't, you're no longer going to maintain this job. Is that controlling? Is that insecure? I think not. Why? Let's get back to the definition. Controlling means to essentially influence one's behavior through force, threats, or intimidation. Everything that I just described to you about an employer is a healthy, successful business 9 times out of 10. And guess what, folks? A person who is out of control, right, is going to think the employer is being controlling and insecure. But what the employer recognizes is that anything great can never consist of something that is inconsistent or chaotic. I'm going somewhere. Stay with me. So as it pertains to your relationship, good ma'am or good sir, if your partner, and let's focus on the bad, let's understand what force, intimidation, and threat would look like within the context of a relationship. And let's contrast it to an employer relationship. So let's talk about the bad. Force, intimidation, or threat in a relationship would be if this person is physically harming your person, meaning you as a person, they're absolutely controlling you in that moment. If that person is physically harming your property, meaning punching through doors, through walls, throwing things, destroying things, they are attempting to control you what? Through threat, force, or intimidation. If that person, when you are in an argument, is calling your friends and family member directly to try to, by force, influence your friends and family members to be on their side because they know that by right they're going to take your side, that is an act of control. Now, let's look at the good. Within the context of a relationship, reminding you of that concept we approach with an employer. If you and your partner have agreed upon boundaries and standards, whatever that looks like for your relationship, and let me kind of pause right there. Good sir or good ma'am, if you and your partner don't have predetermined, pre-established boundaries and communication, I can guarantee you're going to have an unhealthy relationship. What do boundaries and standards look like? These are my non-negotiables. Here are your non-negotiables. What would that look like in a healthy relationship? Number one, and we can look at a billion different data points. A committed man or woman in a long-term relationship or a marriage, neither are appropriately in bounds if they think it's healthy to have male and female relationships of the opposite sex. Why? Because it never works. One or both individuals in that friendship is going to catch feelings. And I'm going to tell you something, ladies, as a man. I have never once wanted to be friends with a woman who I wasn't interested in. Now, what that means is the moment or the circumstance may not have been appropriate. So what I always did in those scenarios is I removed myself from the friendship if I knew my intention really wasn't to be a friend. Why? That's called being a man, which is you go do you, I'm going to do me, because I'm not going to live in a lie and pretend like my objective or agenda is not what it is, which is to make you my woman. Why? Because that's what a healthy man does. He's not going to play the game for 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20 year, acting like he just wants a friendship when his goal is romantic desire. What? Only a weak beta simp does that. You heard me. Now, for women, your agenda is attention, validation, and time. Why? Because that benefits you, but it doesn't benefit the male in a relationship. Let's progress forward. If you have a boundary, let's just say that I'm not going to deal with a partner who is going to be addicted to drugs or alcohol, then you would be wise to have that boundary for each other. Or if the two of you are going to agree, right, that for a lot of different reasons I won't go into, we're not doing a former spouse or former boyfriend or girlfriend friendships. Why? Because it's foolish. It never works. It's disingenuous. It's counterproductive to the relationship. Well, guess what? Boundaries and standards that exist in corporate America have to also exist within a healthy relationship. Why? Because you have to understand that to build great things or do great things requires honest, ethical effort and honest, ethical intentions if you want great outcomes, whether it be in business or within your personal life. And so when we really look at being honest with ourselves, I think that the employer methodology is one of the best places to start within the context of security, non-security, controlling or non-controlling. It means we have to be honest, which is this. If the employer or if my partner, right, is acting in control, not in control of you, but meaning setting a standard. Why do standards have to exist in a relationship? Because as a king, I understand my job is to love, lead, and elevate you. And guess what? That means I am preparing you, me, and us, not for where we are, but where are we headed in 10 or 15 years? Why? Because that is what an employer is doing. They're setting drug testing, employee handbooks, correction, action. What? To help the entire organization reach or exceed its goals within 10 to 15 years. Because that is what a real man, that is what a real leader, that is what a real employer does if they are healthy. So let's be honest. Is this person acting in control? Meaning, if the person is setting or maintaining boundaries and standards that the two of you agree to, as long as they are not threatening, intimidating, or by physical force, they're not being controlling. They are in control within context of the agreed upon standards, no different than your employer with a application process, with a onboarding process, with a maintaining your employment standard is acting in control. Why? Because chaos is what creates negative outcomes. So too in your relationship. Let's be honest. If the person is consistently communicating the agreed upon boundaries, meaning insecure means to not firmly be fixed, meaning they're wishy-washy, they're passive aggressive. So if your partner is securely approaching subjects related to this is what we agreed upon, this is the boundary and standard we have within our relationship, this is the boundary and standard we have within our relationship to get to where we want to go in 10 to 15 years, means that when you are infringing on the boundaries and standards that we both agreed to, let me really pause there, that we both agreed to, that is when you know if security or insecurity. So what does that mean? What does that mean? That means is I'm never personally or professionally going to control you. You do what you want to do. I'm not going to threaten you. I'm not going to intimidate you. I'm not going to force you to do anything. You do whatever you want. Just understand, because I am a person in control, doesn't live in chaos, that if you walk outside of those boundaries and standards, you will fire yourself. The thousands of employees I've interviewed, the hundreds of employees who have worked for me, I always would tell them the truth. I never have to fire you. You'll fire yourself. What was I saying? Is that if I cannot lead you, I will no longer choose to lead you because I can replace you personally or professionally. It's that simple. Okay, when we look at the context of insecurity, if that person will securely communicate that, whoa, wait a minute, this is how I feel. Like we already agreed upon these standards. Are we still on the same page, or do I need to do something different? Why? Because I am a secure person. An insecure employer, right, would be the type of person who doesn't talk to you directly, talks to you about everybody in your job, about what you ain't doing and how they unhappy. See, that is a chaotic, unhealthy employer that I don't want to work for. Why? Because a secure employer will say, hey, check this out, Shaun. Let me show you this acknowledgement of handbook receipt. You remember on page so-and-so, you agreed that if you were running greater than 10 minutes late, you needed to call us. And that once you had 3 occurrences of being late 10 minutes or more, that you were going to be written up on a point system. And if you do that enough, you're going to have to find yourself another job. That is a secure manager, leader, or owner who is holding me accountable to the standards and boundaries that we both agreed upon by virtue of my signature. And so what I'll say is this, in conclusion, this is a very fine line matter that is oftentimes, especially in relationships, a gaslight tactic where a party in the relationship who is out of control, we'll use the phrase controlling, and a person within the relationship who is behaving insecure, which is not being firmly fixed or passive aggressive, will now accuse the other person of being insecure when the truth is it's the person is actually secure, which is why they're addressing bad behavior. And yet the employer-employee relationship is the simplest, non-emotional way to logically address these behaviors. So I will finish with where I started essentially. The word controlling means if someone is influencing you through force, threats, or intimidation, which typically within the context of a relationship means they are harming your persons or your property or seeking to infringe upon your sacred relationships to manipulate that party through their narrative, that's inappropriate. Personally, when I've been in a disagreement with someone personally or professionally, I never went to their parent or cousin or sibling or spouse to try to narrate my perspective. Now, I'm going to share my perspective with my trusted counsel. Why? Because I want them to enlighten me and hold me accountable to change. But I'm never going to go to your side of the table because that is controlling. Why? Because you're attempting to influence that person's trusted circle to side with you, which is unhealthy. Insecure means when a person is not firmly fixed, meaning they're wishy-washy or they're passive aggressive or they're not honest and transparent with how they really feel. That is an insecure person. A person who securely will communicate their position to say, look, we agreed upon these standards and boundaries. Doesn't make them insecure. It actually makes them very secure. Why? Because they are wisely only holding you accountable to what we agreed upon within the context of the relationship. So if you like these types of videos, like, comment, subscribe, follow to help us better understand the narrative of what answers and solutions you're looking for. But in the meantime, between time, as always, I'm Shaun J. Ford, a real estate developer as well as author, affectionately known as Uncle Shaun, wanting to remind you that as the creator of Developer Nation, we exist to help aspiring real estate developers execute large and small scale projects as we educate and equip you and partner with you to bring you in front of our capital partners, being family offices, high net worth individuals, private equity and hedge fund, to get your project funded, assuming it is viable and feasible, wherein you will not only see that project come to reality, but will maintain an equity position as we practice group economics as it relates to the community that is Developer Nation to help you build generational wealth for your children's children. As I always finish, all things work together for the good of those that love God and are called according to his purpose. I will see you in the next episode.